We're checking out Atlas 2.5. This is a quality of life update. So I have a bunch of workflow improvements to show you in this video while Matt works hard away at some new features in the upcoming updates. I'm using the Customizable Chill Step pack, which is in the expansions here. This is a free pack, you can download it. So first up, let me close the browser. Let's open up the sequencer. And you'll notice down here on the left of each track, we have a lock and a randomize. So I can lock various tracks like my kick and my snare, my rides, my hats. And now if I go new sequence, it's going to generate new content, but for the ones that I didn't lock. So that's really handy. You can lock the ones that you like and get some new stuff. If you're not happy with something, you can choose the randomize. I'm going to choose it for all of them, and you can just kind of muck around until you find something that you like. Let's roll with that. Now you'll see we've got 64th and 64th triplet options now for note values. So I'm going to choose 64. Let's open up this hi-hats here, and I'm going to do some little kind of almost modulation fills here if you like your kind of glitchy stuff. Let's do triplets just to have a listen. Neat stuff. You'll also see we have a left and right rotate per track. So this goes in increments of what you have selected here. I'm going to choose 64, and you'll see I can move this track across by 64th notes. And for those of you who use Atlas in a DAW or a host, you'll see we've got host sync set here, but if I click on the BPM and drag up, we get ×2, and if I click and drag down, we get divided by 2. So if you're actually finding Atlas is not going at the same speed of what you're producing in, if let's say you're writing something at 80 BPM, but you're actually producing in 160, this is a good way to get things all nice and matched up. Let's jump back to the standalone. I'm just going to close down my sequencer here, and I'm going to talk about map filters. First of all though, let's just check out the folder tree. You'll see we have a number to show us how many samples we actually have within a folder. Not very handy for this one, but if I go into, say, the Atlas factory map, you'll see Bass has 73 samples, Bass Digital has 55, and so on. And this also works for subfolders too. So here's all of our bongos and things like that. We have improved ticking and unticking. So before, sometimes when you clicked none or when you clicked all, it got a little bit difficult, but now everything's nice and fast. In fact, everything's much faster. Indexing is faster. We can kind of click around like this. We have no spinning wheels, and everything's just nice and smooth. So that's really nice. We can right click on these headers here if we want to display just one of these categories. So if you don't want everything open at once, you can just click on these. Let me just close these down. And the last thing is things are now sorted alphabetically. You'll see we've got bass, chords, drums, and even the subfolders here for the subcategories of the drums are alphabetical. I'm going to close down my filters here and go to the export menu. We'll just open up the sequencer and click on export. You'll notice I can now get a settings option when I hover over the name. So if I open this up, we can name things however we like, and we have some dynamic options. So at the moment it's just name and BPM, and you'll see it gives an example of what that is here. But let's say I want it to be Tom's render dash name dash, and then I'll click on name, and then we'll go underscore BPM. So this is now named in a particular type of structure. And we also have category and channel number when you're doing your stems path. So if you've got your own naming system that you like to stick to, this will help you greatly. Let's close this down and we'll go discard. We'll close down the sequencer. And I want to talk to you about hovering over samples. I'm going to go back to my big map here, and I'm going to turn this on. And what happens now when similar samples is open is when I click on a sample, that's the only time that we're going to get the similar samples. So let's go zoom in and look at our kicks here. Let's choose one of these. You'll see this has now been populated with a bunch of kicks. Let's go over to the congas. Let's try this one. And now we've got our similar samples. So each time you click when you're in this hover mode, that's where you're going to get the similar samples. If I zoom out here and we'll choose Galaxy mode, I'm going to open up my filters again. Everything's playing at the moment, but if I just choose kick and snares and toms, you'll see only those samples that are highlighted or currently selected are going to actually play when I hover over them. You'll see these ones play nothing. We've got a few stragglers around here. So another handy way of just finding exactly the type of samples that you want. In this mode, we can now use the WASD keys. So if I go back to Earth, I can click on something, and I can move around with the WASD keys. Kind of looks like snake. We can now do this in list mode, so I'm just going to go back and choose kicks, and we'll choose our kick drum slot. And let's just find some kicks. I'm going to cycle up and down with the S and W keys. If I want to re-trigger, I push D. Just find one I like. Let's go with that one. When I'm happy, I push A. So that's S for down, W for up, D to re-trigger, and A to replace it over here. If we jump over to our maps, I'm just going to open up one of these. You'll see that under advanced options, use file and folder names as category hints is now set to default for new maps. So I always had this ticked anyway. I found it had better results, but now this is always going to be enabled. Also, if I close this down, you'll see we have a refresh button. So if you've added new maps from your browser or your expansion manager, these will show up here. Now just one little thing, if I go into my settings, you'll see that the audio MIDI settings are now always at the top, so I can just click on here to open those up. That was a little bit hard to find before, but it's always at the top of the settings, and remember settings is down in the bottom right. There's been some small graphical tweaks on the panel alignment, so everything's a lot more smoother and how everything pops out, but we can also drag this to resize it now from any corner or any of the edges. Now let's talk about using multiple samples. I'm going to select all the samples here, and I'm going to go into advanced mode. Everything here now changes every single sample. That includes everything here and everything here, from reverse to all the modulation, the randomization, the velocity mods. But the main thing is choke groups now apply to all the samples you have selected. So for example, I could select these three and say choke group number 1. I could select these here and say choke 2, and these ones here for choke 3. So this is really handy for putting all of these things into individual choke groups. The shape release time has been extended to, let me just select one individual sample here, has been extended to 1500 milliseconds. It used to be around 650, I believe. Now we can go up to a full 1.5 seconds. And let's talk about the start and end points and the fades. So I'm going to pick my snare here. I'm going to bring this back so it's nice and snappy. Let's just give it a little fade and a little bit more of an end point. I'm going to lock this, and now I'm going to randomly choose a new snare. You'll see that it retains the start, end point, and the fades. Very, very handy. The final thing I want to show you is in some hosts we can have the ability to get the drum slot names inside of our MIDI clips. Unfortunately, this doesn't work with all hosts yet. This is a host specific thing, not an Atlas thing. For example, in Ableton Live, it's not going to work, but if I move over to something like Reaper, you'll see that I've got an instance of Atlas, and if I open up a MIDI clip, you can see we've got the names of our slots here. So we've got kick, snare, clap, and hi-hat closed, kick, snare, clap, hi-hat closed, and so on and so on. So that concludes this update. There is a bunch of other performance improvements and bug fixes, but I won't go into those. Stay tuned for the next one for some new features. My name's Tom. Have a great day.